Welcome to Psychic Social, brought to you by psychic.co.uk.
On this episode of Psychic Social.
So I said to the lady sitting there, I said, look, I have to tell you, because I have to tell you what I get, what I see. I said, I'm seeing two pairs of hands, and I described them to her. And she looked at me and she said, you've got my parents with you.
Welcome to Psychic Social with me, Oliver Duke, the podcast that explores all things from the psychic and spiritual perspectives, including interviews with famous psychic practitioners, discussions about the afterlife, the paranormal, and much more. So relax and enjoy the show. Today's guest is known as the Chelsea Clairvoyant, with an astounding 40 years experience carrying out psychic readings for people from all walks of life. She's a particularly tuned-in empath, allowing her to deeply feel and connect with people's emotions with complete clarity. We're so pleased we've managed to get her on the show. It's the wonderful Rosemary. Rosemary, how are you today?
I'm doing very well, Oliver, and thank you so much for asking me to participate.
Wonderful to have you on Psychic Social today. So what have you been up to today? Anything exciting?
Well, there's always lots to do. I find there's always a lot of admin things that take your attention. There's always a lot of calls and emails and this and that and getting the diary sorted out. Mm-hmm. So, yes, I've been reasonably productive today, you'd say. Good
stuff. Sounds good. Yeah, good stuff. Well, we wanted to ask you, as we kind of move on into the show, during the really difficult times like we've had over the last sort of 18 months with these lockdowns and due to COVID, how did you kind of keep your positive vibrations raised, personally? And is there anything that you could recommend to people listening that they could do as well to raise their own vibrations if they were kind of, feeling a bit demoralised by this, as I think we all have been?
Yes, well, I can completely understand the feelings of being demoralised, but I'm quite a lucky person because I do enjoy my own company, and I actually, whilst I'm gregarious and I love people, I do need a little bit of solitude as well. So I think I was fortunate in the respect that I didn't really mind being on my own. And I always, quite resourceful. I always find something to do. And I did start doing a lot of writing during lockdown, as many people did. I also did a lot of catch-up reading and tackled all the cardboard boxes and drawers and cupboards, doing a sort of archaeological dig on papers. And it's fascinating what you can unearth, going through all old photographs and trip down memory lane. But, as far as keeping one's spirits up, In lockdown, I think a lot of people found it extraordinarily difficult, and I did a lot of work with clients on Zoom and Skype and so forth. And one of the things I would say, it's a very, very simple thing, but music that you enjoy, particularly if you can get a wiggle on and get wiggling to it, it really releases the energy if you can just get your body moving to the music or just simply enjoy. If you want to sit and listen to some classical, it doesn't matter what your taste is. If it's music that you enjoy, it automatically uplifts the spirit. Mm-hmm. The other thing is, if one has the opportunity to go out and be amongst nature, I know that sounds like a cliche, but actually, it does put you right in touch with where you are on the planet, as it were. Mm-hmm. Self-care, very important. And that's not self-indulgent. I mean, buy that extra expensive bottle of bath oil, buy that bunch of flowers for yourself that you wouldn't normally, make it more of a habit, because the more you give to yourself, the more the universe will reflect that back to you. So I just think that there are certain things that you can do, and also don't be afraid to be vulnerable. Reach out to a friend, phone them up and say, listen, this is a phoner moan. I feel dreadful. How are you? Yeah. And by the end of it, you've either had a great mutual moan and make each other feel better, or you've had a great mutual moan and made each other feel worse. No, but you've got to reach out and recognise that this is not just happening to you.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that is really good advice. And a lot of people, have been doing kind of video calls, haven't they? And having video when we were kind of, locked in our houses as we were a couple of times. People were having sort of video drinks, weren't they? Where they were kind of having if you do partake in alcohol, they were having a couple of glasses of wine and a chat over video, which was kind of, the next best thing to actually being in person. And people have been doing that, haven't they? Quite a lot. I think
we've all, rediscovered the importance of actually communicating with one another and a bit more often too.
Exactly. Yeah, definitely. Well, that's great advice. Thank you, Rosemary, for that. Well, we wanted to learn some more about you in terms of your journey and how you came to be where you are now and where you've come from. We wanted you to sort of take us back to the beginning. How did you become like a clairvoyant? Did the gift come to you, or was it passed down by a family member, or were you just born with it? How did it come to you?
Well, you could say all of the above, which is the kind of really quick answer, and it's rather irritating because it doesn't give much information.
Okay.
I'll try and give you the information. I can remember being in my pram on one occasion very, very clearly. I have an older sibling, and I remember looking out of my pram and consciously thinking, what on earth is my older sibling doing? Because they were at that point in a sand pit and sort of throwing sand around. And I couldn't quite get a grip on what that was all about. But I do remember thinking those thoughts very consciously, which is not what a baby would think. Mm-hmm. So having gone back to that, there was some sort of other consciousness or broader awareness there that made me realize, not that I realized it then, but later on when I remembered this incident, that there is a bigger consciousness going on. My family are Celtic, Welsh, Irish, Scottish. There's a smattering of French and a smattering of Spanish, but then, we're all a bit of a mixture. Mm-hmm. But my grandmothers, my Irish grandmother could read by breaking an egg into a glass of water, which I've never heard of before or since. Since. Nobody practiced professionally at all, but both sides of the family had various gifts, and my other grandmother could astral travel. And she was actually born in India, but she one night dreamt about what was Peking then, Beijing, the Forbidden City. And this must have been around 1900. And she was a very good artist, so she sketched, when she woke up, she sketched this Forbidden City, and she did the colours, the green tiles or red tiles or ochre pillars or crimson pillars, whatever it was. But Pune in India didn't have a good reference library, so she couldn't find any verification that what she'd actually seen and drawn was accurate until, as a late teens, she came back to this country and at one point went off to the British Museum. I think it was either British Museum or British Library, one of the two, and asked to see books if there were any photographs of the Forbidden City. And sure enough, there was a black and white photograph of what she'd drawn, exactly the same thing.
Wow.
And underneath there was a description of the colours of the tiles and the pillars and the whatever. So she knew that what she'd seen was accurate, and she thought it was a great game. She could sort of zap around the planet and go and have a look at various things. I mean, nowadays you'd call it remote viewing. So she was quite happy doing that. I had another aunt who used to read tea leaves, and she was jolly accurate, but she just did it as a sort of party piece. And I have another aunt who's still with us. She's 100 years old, an amazing lady, and she's a healer. So whilst nobody practiced professionally, I just knew from early on that this was something that was around. Other people, as I grew up, I found that they didn't quite have it in their background. So I learned to be quiet about it, because it became to be regarded that if you could see things or feel things, I thought everyone could.
Yep.
But then I discovered as I grew up that I couldn't. So I sort of shut up about it. But in my teens, I was drawn to tarot, and through tarot I found the mediumship, and that sort of opened up. So it's always been with me.
Well, it's very interesting to hear, your past history and where you've come from and where you are now, and the astral projection stuff and the remote viewing stuff. I always find absolutely fascinating. Give that a Google or have a look at it on YouTube or wherever your poison is, and have a look at that. It's fascinating stuff. Well, thank you for that, Rosemary. Well, we're going to ask you next, do you have a heartwarming story that particularly stands out from the many readings that you've done in the past?
Well, yes, I do. I think it's more heartwarming for me than anybody else, but I'll tell you about it. I was working in a restaurant in the West End, and under a restaurant situation, I'd be sitting there with my little table, and people had come along, and they'd either have a 10 or a 15-minute reading, because when you're out to dinner, you don't really want more than that. And there was a lovely lady, Italian lady, who came along, and we were talking. I was laying cards for her, and suddenly over the cards, I saw two pairs of hands, a lady's hands and a gentleman's hands. And the gentleman's hands were very big and very worn, and the lady's hands were quite young, but they were twisted with arthritis. And I thought, good Lord, what on earth is this? So I said to the lady sitting there, I said, look, I have to tell you, because I have to tell you what I get, what I see. I said, I'm seeing two pairs of hands, and I described them to her. And she looked at me and she said, you've got my parents with you. And I said, well, how does that work? Explain. And what had happened was that when her parents first got married, her mum used to do all the cooking, her father used to go out to work, and in Italy you have this thing of, the very masculine man, he goes out, he does the man's job, and the woman is in the house and she does the woman's job and all this. So she was, cooking and cleaning at home, but gradually she got very, very bad arthritis at an extremely young age, and her hands became so crippled that she couldn't actually cook. So she had to teach her husband how to cook. And he'd come home from work and she'd direct operations and teach him how to cook. And he had to cook for the family simply because she couldn't lift the pans or stir things or whatever, or chop, And they had to keep it a great secret because this Italian lady's father would have had, he would have lost face, bella figura. So they kept it a big secret in the family. And that's what was coming through the reading. Both her parents had passed, this lovely lady, but they wanted to communicate to her about not keeping things secret, about letting it out, because, people soon get used to secrets. People soon get over, shocks and things like that. And the unfamiliar quickly becomes the familiar. So it was very relevant to this young lady about something that was going on in her life, that her parents came through and did say to her, look, we kept our secret and there was absolutely no need for it. And we would have got a lot more help if we'd actually opened up about that. So that was their message to her. And she contacted me some months after this event and told me a bit more about her story and what had happened. And it was wonderful that, her parents had come through to encourage her to release that secret, or, well, not secret, but part of her life that she felt she couldn't divulge. She was afraid of the vulnerability aspect. But when she did, life became so much easier for her. So that, for me, was absolutely wonderful. And it was also a real turning point about my mediumship.
That was really fascinating, and sounds like a wonderful reading that you did for her. Fantastic. Well, we want to move on to the next question before we go into a break. We wanted to ask you about your study, because you've studied quite a lot. You're a member of not only the Arthur Findlay College, but the College of Psychic Studies too. Can you give us a brief insight into what it's like to study at both these highly regarded spiritual places?
Well, yes, I can. I mean, I'm a great believer in ongoing professional development, because when you work in isolation, you do need your own kind, your own type of people who understand what you're on about. To be with a group of people that you don't have to explain yourself because you're all coming from the same place is wonderful. But I also feel that, quite frankly, Oliver, any reader who says, well, I've learned it all, I'm here and I've done it, is talking nonsense, because there's always something more to learn. I mean, for example, I learn from my students all the time. It's fascinating. But the College of Psychic Studies is in London, in Kensington, and it's a very well-established old building, and the college, I believe, was opened in 18-something. I haven't got the date to hand. But they do all sorts of fascinating courses, and it's really lovely to dip in. They do weekend workshops or evening talks as well. So if you just sort of want to plug in and go and have a bit of a top-up there, that's terrific. The Arthur Findlay College is set in the most beautiful grounds in Essex, and it's a lovely old house. And it was given by Arthur Findlay, because hence the Arthur Findlay College. And Arthur Findlay was a great mate of Sir Arthur Conan Doyle's. And both of them were very into mediumship and what you might call the occult or spiritual matters. And he left Stansted Hall, Arthur Findlay left Stansted Hall to the Spiritualist National Union, who run it now. And I've been privileged to study there over a 11-12 year period, and they have residential courses, and it's what I call spiritual boot camp. There's nowhere to hide. They work you from 9 o'clock in the morning till 9 o'clock at night, and it's wonderful. It's exhausting, but it's wonderful. And it has been my privilege to work with some of the top tutors, on the globe, including the marvellous Mavis Patilla and Eamon Downey, who I've ended up editing books for. I'm naming a few names: Jackie Wright, Eileen Davis, Thelma Francis, wonderful people. I'm sorry if I've left anybody out. I'm sure I have. But, I think it's so important when you do this work to always up your game, because, for example, if you're a tennis player and you play matches with people who are on your same level, you're never going to develop. But if you're a tennis player and you want to up your game, you've got to play with Djokovic. You've got to find out what that's like. You've got to go with people who are greater than yourself. You've got to go with more experienced people, and that's how you up your game, and that's how you develop as a reader, as a medium. I think it's very important. And I would advise anybody who's looking for a good reader to find out what their attitude to ongoing professional development really is.
Completely agree with that. Yes, most definitely. Well, thank you, Rosemary. Well, that's going to move us nicely into a break now. We're hearing some fantastic stuff from Clairvoyant-Medium Rosemary here on Psychic Social today. And we're very much looking forward to hearing more from her in part 2, where we'll hear about her guides, her fascinating take on the afterlife, and much more. So we'll see you after this. Hi, hope you're enjoying the show today. Now, we have a brand new horoscope email you can subscribe to at psychic.co.uk. All you have to do is wait for the pop-up to show on the website and then enter your email and star sign. And every Sunday night we'll email you a free horoscope for the week ahead. Now, you can dive in one step further if you wish and take a look at our Horoscope Plus memberships. This is your weekly horoscope plus a lot more. There are 3 memberships to choose from, and we've covered all budgets, we feel. So the Robin membership gives you private, exclusive access to a more detailed horoscope on the member horoscope pages at the website, and a chance to win a psychic reading via Zoom each month. And you'll get a free access code as well to the taster version of our amazing video tarot course with Nikki Allen, 10-Hour Tarot. Now, this membership is just £1.99 per month, and you can cancel it anytime you like. There's a ton of stuff in there for such a small amount of money, so much value. The next membership we've got is the Feather membership. It's a step up from there, and it's just £5.99 per month, and you can also cancel anytime for that one too. Now, as a Feather member, you'll get a much more detailed, in-depth horoscope than the Robin membership horoscope. And on that Feather member horoscope page on the website, you'll get exclusive access to that with over 1,000 words of horoscope broken down into 3 sections. That's including romance, work and family. It really will give you a fantastic insight into the week ahead every single week. You'll also get our truly amazing astrology video. That's thrown in for free as well, which is 30 minutes of fantastic content on astrology. And as with the Robin membership, you'll also get a chance to win a psychic reading via Zoom every month too. So that's wonderful value in there as well for $5.99 a month for the Feather membership. And the final membership is the Angel member. That's the top level membership to access on the site. That gives you some amazing stuff, and all that info is on the website. Just head to psychic.co.uk/membership and take a look at which one will suit you. We'll put the link in the show notes of this podcast down below for you, so you can just click there and check them all out there. You can also check out the horoscope page and have a little sneak peek at what the Robin members are getting there already. That's at psychic.co.uk/horoscope. Right, now back to the show. Welcome back to part 2 of Psychic Social and our chat with Clairvoyant-Medium Rosemary. Now, we wanted to ask you, Rosemary, we've been hearing about your clairvoyance through the show so far, and a bit of history about you. Can you tell us a bit more about your mediumship side of things? Maybe about your guide or guides? Do you have one or many, and how does that all work for you?
Well, I am very much of the experience that everybody has a collective. It's not just one guide. They are raw energy. They're not pink and fluffy. So with the guidance that we've got and that we're privileged to have, it is a collective, and the collective members of the collective will step forward at the moment that their particular expertise is needed for whatever situation is in that we're in. I do believe also, through my experience and through my students' experiences, that when we see, as in see with our internal eye, with our third eye, our guides, assist us. They don't make decisions for us. They don't take responsibility for us, but they do assist us with what we're dealing with. And if you want a closer connection with your guide, you simply have to ask. You have to ask sincerely, and you have to ask often, and you will find that you will receive messages, hints, nudges, whether that be a feeling or a book falls open at random, or you turn on the radio and there's a headline or there's a particular lyric or something like all these things. Mm-hmm. If you're finely attuned to receiving messages from your guidance or guides or inspirers, I prefer to call them inspirers, these are communications. And it takes quite a long time and discipline and years of meditation, or what we call sitting in the power, which isn't necessarily meditation, but there's too much information around that to go into right now. But when you connect your own spirit to the collective consciousness and seek out your inspirers and guides, if you do that regularly, you will form a closer bond, because it is like any muscle. The more you flex it, the stronger it gets. Mm-hmm. But your guides and inspirers will help you anyway, but you have to remember to ask.
Sure. Yep. Well, it's interesting to hear all that. What do you think about kind of when you see, like if you see a feather, or white feather, or whatever the colour of the feather may be, and you might perceive that as some sort of sign? When do you think it's a sign, and when do you think, well, I've just seen a feather on the floor? I mean, I've always kind of thought that, and I do kind of believe in those kind of signs in a certain way, but I don't know. I find it sometimes hard to interpret them.
Yes, I can completely understand that, and I just feel that you instinctively know whether your feather is a message or whether your feather is a feather. Mm. I mean, if you're walking out in nature in the countryside, you're bound to see lots of pigeons' feathers. If you're lucky, you might see a pheasant's feather or what have you. But if you're in an urban area and you've had the windows closed and you come into the room and there's a white feather on the floor, I think you can bet your bottom dollar that that's a message. It's just a matter of fine tuning. But it's like I say, it's not always feathers. It could be something else. I mean, for example, when my dear darling Mama passed, one of her calling cards was to fiddle with my earrings. She used to put my earrings in different places. Right.
Well, it's interesting to hear all that. Thank you, Rosemary. Now, we also understand that you've read people at some very famous restaurants in London with a bit of your history. Can you tell the listeners a little bit about all that, please?
Well, yeah, I started out at a chain of Lebanese restaurants, and jolly nice they were too. And they used to have, well, they're still going. I hope they are. I hope they survived the COVID. So they had belly dancers, and they, if people were having birthday parties, they'd have all sorts like fire eaters and goodness only knows not what. And I was there quite often doing my thing. But after that, I progressed to sort of private members clubs, mainly around Belgravia, Mayfair. And I have read at Annabelle's, the famous Annabelle's, and George's Club. I've read at the Lansdowne and Tontaria, which is in Chelsea. That used to be a great favourite haunt of Prince Harry's. Right. So, it's I enjoy it. I do enjoy that environment because, everyone's having a good time and, they want to come for a little taster reading. I mean, that's really all you can do in a sort of party, restaurant-y, clubby type environment. You can't go, terribly much in depth, but people love it. It's popular and you can help. You can be helpful, give a little bit of insight here and there. So, yes, I've been very privileged to work in those lovely places. Sure.
And would you mainly have used cards there, tarot cards or oracle cards, or would you have done a bit of mediumship as well in those situations?
It's in that kind of environment, it's actually quite difficult. I mean, the example I gave you about the Italian lady and her parents' hands, that was a very unusual. Because it was in a noisy sort of restaurant situation. I don't find mediumship comes in those circumstances. Mm-hmm. It needs a bit more of a quieter atmosphere. But yes, I would tune into people with tarot. You don't really have time to sit with their energy terribly much. So it's good to get an in with tarot as a tool to kind of get you going in tune.
Sure. Totally understand that. Yeah. Okay. Well, it's interesting to hear all that. Thank you for that, Rosemary. Well, we want to move on to our final sort of psychic related or mediumship related question. What are your thoughts about the afterlife? I mean, through your experiences so far, especially the mediumship side of things, and what do you think happens when we leave Earth?
Well, the body dies, but the consciousness does not. And I believe it goes into the collective of love. And, many people have written about their near-death experiences when they talk about, walking towards the light or going through a tunnel of light or this kind of thing, and seeing their loved ones there, ready to greet them, ready to, I think the expression is help them across, from one dimension to another. My own findings and experience is that when we pass, we do go into this collective of love, and we are connected with every other spirit, and we see the bigger picture, and we're given the opportunity to have a review of how the lifetime was, what was great, what we feel we could have done better, what our experiences and lessons have been in that lifetime. And then we have choices. I do believe that we are given choices about whether or not we feel we need to experience things from a different angle, again, i.e. reincarnate, or whether we want to be of service to humanity in different ways, in terms of being some part of a collective guidance, or there are, I believe, many other options. I don't go for this idea of heaven and hell.
No.
Shoot me down in flames if I'm wrong, but I really don't, because I can't actually see the point of it. I think that if you screw up badly in this life and you do harm to others, then when you pass on, you've got an opportunity to really look at that and look at the implications and see the bigger picture and see the effect of your actions on others. And then when you're coming from a place of pure love, to say to yourself, well, actually, do I need to go back and experience that to be on the receiving end of it, so that I really do understand? Because I do believe that every lifetime and every experience we have is the refinement of the soul. That's the whole point of it.
Do you believe, I mean, this is something that I kind of postulate that could be the truth or may not, that you could have like your spiritual awakening or a realization of a life that you're having on the earth plane that is not, stuck in the mundane. So you have that awakening and you realize what things are all about, and you make that sort of spiritual ascension mentally while you're on earth, and then you decide, you become so awake and aware that you might realize that this might be your last incarnation on earth. Would you kind of subscribe to that when people have those thoughts?
Well, I think it's possible. And after all, I mean, the Buddha, he had a lifestyle that was completely opposite to the one that he ended up with, and so forth. But there's a wonderful American writer called Thaddeus Golaz, and he's written a book called The Lazy Man's Guide to Enlightenment, and it's great fun. And he talks about you can achieve enlightenment even from your armchair. And I do believe that's true. I absolutely believe it's true. However, I feel that you've got to have a certain sort of mindset. And, energy is vibration. If you put your hand on your throat when you speak, you feel a vibration. So everything has a knock-on effect on everything else. So when you do the best you can do in this life, it actually has an effect on all the other lives, both past and future. But then, when we get into quantum physics, which I love, by the way, the relationship between spirit and quantum physics is fascinating to me. But that time in this sense is not linear. So, it is all happening at once. So if you've done a big screw up in the last lifetime or several lifetimes ago, well then, by being kind and gentle and generous and all the other things, and doing good and doing no harm in this lifetime and being aware and mindful, then you can knock out a lot of the effects of that. That's what I feel.
Yes. always fascinating to hear everyone who comes on Psychic Social's thoughts on that, and thank you for yours, Rosemary. We're now coming towards the end of the show, and the last couple of questions we've got for you are going to be moving slightly away from the psychic world. We just wanted the listeners to get to know a bit more about you in terms of what you like to read, although you've mentioned already a couple of books in the show already, and what you kind of like to watch on TV, so kind of box sets or TV shows, anything like that.
Well, I tell you what, when I get reading, I'm a bit sort of all over the place because I have 3 books on the go at the moment. I've got one, it's called Soul Journeying by Alberto Villadoro, and it's about shamanism meeting quantum physics. So that is wonderful.
Fascinating. Sounds fascinating.
It is. He's a great writer. Yeah. And then I've also got Droplets of God, which is the life of Mavis Patilla, written by Susan Geisman. And I'm also reading Akashic Records by Mary Silver, because she's married up, tapping into the Akasha with tarot. So that's, very interesting to me. As far as television goes, well, I'm a sucker for a nature program or, lovely programs about the coast of Britain or, our history and things like this. I love. I like a good drama. Yeah, I do get taken up. I love Margaret Atwood, so I'm completely taken with The Handmaid's Tale at the moment, although it's terribly dark. But Elizabeth Moss, the lead actress, is so good. She's compelling. I frankly would watch her reading the telephone book out.
Right.
She's
okay.
So yes, there are all sorts of things. And I like a good film, but I tend these days, particularly in lockdown, I was aware I had to really, really be mindful to keep away from a lot of violence on telly, whether it's a sort of James Bond movie or whatever it is. I found it all a bit too jarring. So, I like much more of a sort of period drama or a gentle piece, something that doesn't, not too sort of shocking.
Sure. Well, thank you for sharing that with us and the listeners. Well, I'd just like to say it's been wonderful to have you on Psychic Social today. Before we let you go, remember you can check out Rosemary's profile on the website right now and you'll be able to contact Rosemary direct. You can also watch her biography video on her profile page and see how Rosemary reads for people on her live readings highlights video. And you can, of course, listen again to this podcast on her profile page as well. This is all available at www.psychic.co.uk/Rosemary. And all that leaves me to say is thank you so much for joining us today and sharing all this great stuff with the listeners here. Rosemary, it's been fantastic to have you on the show.
Well, it's been my pleasure. Thank you so much. Well,
take care and stay safe and well, and we look forward to speaking with you again very soon. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you, Oliver. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Rosemary. Bye.
Thanks for joining us on Psychic Social from psychic.co.uk, the spiritual home of psychics.